Government yesterday launched the Disability Rights Awareness Month, or DRAM. The Minister in the Presidency for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, Maite Nkoana Mashabana, says government's commitment to persons with disabilities is premised on international and national frameworks. Let's discuss now. We're joined by Phuthi Mabelebele, Chief Director of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which is in that governmental department. Thank you for being with us, Chief Director. Tell us what is hoped, what are you hoping to achieve over this month?
Disability Rights Awareness Month, it's a cabinet-approved recognition that there's a need for more awareness to be maximized as we try to implement programs for persons with disabilities and with persons with disabilities. So the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities has got two disability rights awareness programs, and Disability Rights Awareness Month, which starts from the 3rd of November to the 3rd of December, is one of them. The other one is the 365 days on disabilities, where we are maximizing awareness around different disabilities so that we can spread information and have people more knowledgeable about how to deal with persons with different disabilities. With the Disability Rights Awareness Month, what we are doing is to showcase achievements, gaps, challenges that are existing as we are implementing programs, services and projects for and with persons with disabilities.
Can you tell us about those achievements and where the gaps are? Does government have a way to produce a report card, as it were, something tangible, looking at spaces where there is disabled access or wheelchair access, workplaces that are employing people with disabilities? Are we able to gauge exactly where we are?
We are able to gauge on an annual basis. As the Department of Women, we do monitor for compliance and on governance matters as it relates to different programs on persons with disabilities, which includes planning, budgeting, and so forth, and even service delivery. So we are able to produce reports which even other government departments are able to be held accountable on in terms of progress they are making in terms of ensuring that there's disability inclusion in all their programs. Perhaps I should start by saying that access for persons with disabilities is not limited to the built environment or just infrastructure, but we have got challenges which are rooted also, which become barriers, which are entrenched by attitudes. These are behavioral barriers that we're talking to. For instance, these ones perpetuate stigmatization and discrimination of persons with disabilities, and this starts in the family, in the society, in our communities, and then grows into the workplaces and even into societal social programs that are there. But secondly, there are also communication barriers that exist in relation to dissemination of information, as an example. For instance, we are faced with a situation where many people with hearing impairments are not able to access information because of lack of South African Sign Language on many of our platforms. But we are slowly progressing as a government in ensuring that the South African Sign Language becomes a 12th official language. There's much progress in that regard. We are just awaiting very soon for final approvals and announcements that South African Sign Language, as an example of a communication barrier, will become a 12th official language. We have made inroads working with the disability sector with regard to the Copyright Act. You have seen the recent court judgment which talks to copyright issues as they relate to persons who are blind. And therefore, we are making inroads, and those are some of the achievements. The frameworks that we have developed to guide duty bearers, both in the private sector and in the public sector, guiding them and also ensuring accountability, and that they also further develop implementation plans, because we are now working implementation. We're not just talking implementation. We are now working implementation plans for disability inclusion in all programs. Therefore, those frameworks are helping us to ensure accountability, because they can be used to measure
Yeah.
progress in terms of implementation of disability inclusion programs.
So, and I understand what you're saying, it's about attitudes as well, but if we just stick to infrastructure, the basics, let's look at wheelchair access, because this is a huge problem. How are we doing year on year, or how are we doing in terms of wheelchair access pre-COVID versus post-COVID?
Pre and post, we are progressing fairly well. I would say we're doing fairly well because we are seeing with the infrastructure developments, the recent infrastructure developments, that they are made to be universally accessible because there are norms and standards that have been developed by the built environment sector departments in order to guide in terms of construction to make facilities universally accessible. It's not just about wheelchairs, it's about issues of ramps, it's about ensuring that our lifts have got braille on the buttons that we press in the lift, so that also persons who are with visual impairments are able to access, but also audio in the different infrastructures that are there. The challenge that we have is with regard to modifications of existing infrastructure, which is old infrastructure, but we are also slowly seeing various departments, for instance, your police stations, your courts, as they are modifying their infrastructure, which is mostly old infrastructure, they are applying universal design principles and ensuring that their facilities become accessible. We are not yet there. There are still gaps, but we are getting there.
And finally, it must be difficult at schools when we know there's so many infrastructural challenges at schools already. I mean, they even put toilets at schools. So I see the minister emphasize schools. Do we know how many children with disabilities are not able to go to school or are finding school very difficult because of what they're dealing with?
We're working very closely with the Department of Basic Education. About a year ago, we convened what we call the Inclusive Education Summit. And this was coinciding with the fact that White Paper 6 of the Department of Education, which talks to issues of inclusive education, was reaching its end, and we were trying to track progress in terms of ensuring that there's inclusive education. Various challenges have been cited as much as there's progress in that regard, and we're seeing some of the immediate resolutions that were undertaken in that summit already, the Department of Education taking them forward. Indeed, there are children with disabilities, learners with disabilities who are in schools, and some are not in schools. As I indicated earlier on, we also are working with parents of children with disabilities in our system of stakeholder engagement, so that we get the parents to release the children with disabilities to come to schools and to be able to be placed in schools which will be better accommodative and care, but also support and ensure that they receive proper education. There is still a challenge, of course, where in some areas, due to cultural issues and other attitudes and stigmatization and bullying, where the Department of Education is allowing the mainstream schools, which are now being converted into full service schools that will accommodate other disabilities, so that special schools accommodate severe disabilities. There's still a challenge in that regard. But we are working with parents of children with disabilities organizations, but also individual parents, and working with the disability sector, because the wealth of information about disabilities is sitting with the disability organizations, and that is why we cannot work without them.
All right, thank you for that explanation. The month coming up, Disability Rights Awareness Month, launched yesterday. Phuthi Mabelebele from the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Chief Director within that governmental department.